Okay, so we are about to get to our final kind of talk and kind of wrap up the event after that with some networking and drinks upstairs in the bar, which is kind of reserved for us until 11. But before that, a couple of announcements, and actually the first opportunity I'm getting to introduce who Sao is, who's been with you all the entire evening. And Sao, I mean, he has a very, very long background of doing all kinds of technology businesses, kind of some more successful than others, yeah. But over the last 5 years, he's become one of the biggest names in entrepreneurship education in Europe, and he's very, very focused on something he calls peer-to-peer education. And he started Source Institute, where I participate as well in various roles. But the cool things I think that we need to take out of today is that he's gonna be the key guy participating and facilitating an unconference tomorrow, which is kind of a very typical P2P event. Who has been to an unconference before? Okay, so we have like 5, 10 people. It's really cool. It's a really cool way for us to kind of get in groups and tackle more advanced specific issues around stuff that we're actually doing at the moment. I'll let him talk about this. But basically, the story is we saw so much kind of value and feedback coming out of the last event that you guys actually were a lot more advanced than we had anticipated when we organized the first event, and we managed to organize a small unconference tomorrow in a house in Lausanne, which is the office of a tech company called Enhansive, which is kind of, I think, one of the cool companies in Sofia with a lot of traction. So the deal there is basically you come and you have to pay for the expense for your lunch so we can eat together, which is that ticket. A bunch of people have registered. Please find me or anybody from the team afterwards if you want to participate and you haven't registered already, so we can put you on the event, so you can get an email tonight with instructions on how to come there at 11 a.m. or whenever you can. And yeah, that's about the conference. Find me if you have questions about that after Sal presents. And the other thing we want to do is because like I've really struggled to find my way around getting into that whole AI space once we started doing it. And a lot of people around me are really trying to get knowledge and are kind of really working on it. And we got a bunch of interest from different people to do things online. So Sal basically made it his priority to launch an online course about AI. And he's a guy who actually developed a program called The Sources, which is the biggest online education program about African founders with about 10,000 participants. So Sal, do you want to basically come on stage? And actually, did I cover that well enough? Am I missing something important so we can jump into the talk, or do we need to add more to that?
So, unconference tomorrow. The big thing is we get to spend a day together and learn from each other. So this is where we can get more practical, where we can bring our problems, our challenges, and we can start to get a sense of there's a lot of strength, there's a lot of experience in the room. So so if you are getting practical, that's a place for you, and this will be, I think, the start of something. We've seen this work in different cities where you start to see a group of entrepreneurs who start to support each other and figure things out. And I think that potential is here for Sofia and for AI. And we have, I think, 15 people signed up already. So it's going to be good. It's going to be useful if you're getting practical. The online course, I need your help for. So as Lino pointed out, we tested this peer-to-peer format with African founders bringing tech to market in sub-Saharan Africa. And as you might imagine, that's a very fast-changing context where it's hard to get a sense of an expert that can stand at the front of a room and say, I know how to do this exactly. A lot of different people figuring it out. And AI seemed to be a similar type of environment where there's so much going on, so much to keep up on. And so not only how do we keep up on all of the different things that are happening, but who are the people who are actually doing that, because they're not necessarily the big name experts, and how do we make that practical? So we're trying to apply the same thing to this community, and we're just kicking it off next week. So if you could sign up here, ai.source.institute, that would be very helpful. It'll ask a few questions to figure out what your learning goals are now, and then we will try and build the course to suit your needs and adapt it to suit whatever it is you're trying to learn. So your input will be really useful, and it's really, we're starting next week. So anything you can do to join us will be very helpful. Any input, any feedback will be very helpful. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Sal. And now to our final speaker. He's a bit of a wild card, actually, Anish. The story of how I met Anish is quite interesting. We set up a small office in London in a place called Shack 15, which is kind of a co-working space in the heart of Shoreditch, dedicated to data science and companies doing things in that area. And there was a meetup there, and Anish showed up. And basically, the funny thing was that he was the guy asking all the most interesting questions, and then had a better answer to them than the guys actually answering that were supposedly to be the experts on stage. So I didn't know him, but to me it became quite instantly obvious that he has a lot of really deep expertise around a number of topics. And we kind of decided to invite him here, and he was so kind to join us. But to be honest, since then I've been trying to figure out exactly what he does. And what I've got up to now is that he's a medical doctor that practiced for a while and then got really interested in blockchain, security, cryptography, more recently artificial intelligence. And he's advised a lot of big corporations, investors, and founders and so on, like including really big banks like HSBC. He was one of the key people doing the security infrastructure there, and now has taught in places like MIT. There's a bunch in his bio, but I'm just going to invite him, and he maybe can do a better intro of himself, and he can basically give you a talk about some of the kind of practical applications of security and safety around. Yeah, come on. Big applause for Anish. Thank you so much for joining us. Here you go.
I'm not sure I'll be able to do justice to that, but I'll try. So before I start, can I ask you a simple question? So I'm going to get a sense of what the audience is like before I start the talk, because I have some extra slides in there. I've been told that the audience is very techy and they would like to know a lot more detail. So I'm going to start with an audience poll. So I'm going to ask everybody in this room, who here in this room hasn't heard about blockchain? Put your hand up. Hasn't heard. Okay. 1. Okay. 2. Right, that's okay. Next, is there anyone in the room who hasn't heard about smart contracts? Okay, that's fine. Right. So I think that's okay. I get an idea. So I'll give it a try. At any point in time when you guys go, this is hard, put your hand up. I'll stop and I'll try to explain, okay? Right, so this has been in the news. Whenever you talk about, autonomous vehicles, generally things that you think about is the Google cars, something like this, right? And I've been thinking about it a bit because it came in the news and because it was very interesting the way it came in the news. So if you think about autonomous vehicles, it's been a progression. It's like, you can actually have different stages of autonomous vehicles. And the tricky thing about this is like the delineation between any of this is pretty hard, okay? So imagine you have a car, somebody stood outside, might not easily recognize what form or what level of automation do you have? And do you have the ability to intervene? And I'll explain why this is important. Okay, I think that's how it should be, okay? So imagine you are in a car and the car decides to go nuts, gets on the pavement. What are your chances that you be getting out of the car alive? In London, I think the chances are near 0. US, pretty much 0. Now you know why this is important, right? You need to recognize like all the possibilities. Firstly, is it the autonomous system that's in the car going nuts, or the sensors in the car going nuts, or somebody has hacked your car? And then, God forbid, if all those things are not right, the guy in the car is nuts, he should be shot. No questions have added. No, I can't say that because legal stuff happens. Right. So whatever that is, right? It's very, very important. Going forward, it's very important that autonomous vehicles have mechanisms by which security could be maintained because it's, lives of lots of people at stake. Look at each of the incidents that has happened in Berlin, in Stockholm, in other places. Look at the number of lives lost, the impact on humanity. So we need to have mechanisms by which, stupid stuff like this wouldn't happen. And I believe it's absolutely possible to actually have autonomous vehicles which wouldn't do stupid stuff. And the future of vehicles is going to be autonomous. And I'm assuming that's an assumption I'm making. So let me talk a bit about, what I'm going to talk about and kind of the structure. So a bit about security of autonomous vehicles, kind of describe what the key threats are, and possibly I'll give you an intuition on how you could secure it. I can't go into details, but I'll give you a very good idea of how things are, where you could go to. Assuming if I had an answer, then I won't be hanging around and doing this stuff, right? So this almost always there's this big question about economic motivations, right? Think about it this way. Let me play this game to you in a slightly different way. Imagine you had the ability to hack into 1 million cars. And now what you do is after you have hacked into 1 million cars, you turn up to Tesla and you go to Tesla and say, I want 1 billion. If I don't get my billion, all your cars are going to go nuts. What's your choice? Right? That's a real threat. There's an economic incentive that's there so that you can go to somebody to get the money. It's the equivalent of malware that actually encrypts your hard drive and asks you for 1 Bitcoin, right? Whether they decrypt it or not, your choice is simple. You're forced to give that one Bitcoin. If you're lucky, you get your data back, right? That's an encrypting malware. So essentially, they are holding you hostage. So the same thing could happen to autonomous vehicles tomorrow, where this car or cars or vehicles, a fleet of them, could be compromised. And once it's compromised, you are at the mercy of somebody else, right? Now, when you talk about, cars which are autonomous, you should always think about the things before that, right? What happens to things before that gives you an indication of what's going to follow. So the things before that is not that secure. So if you look at the conference talk that was there, you could Google for this. This car was, the car was, or Jeep, whatever you call it, depends on how you describe it, right? Was actually hacked. They could actually hack into the engine management system and actually make it do things they want. That's all it takes, right? While you're driving a car, somebody hacks into your car and just disables your brake. You plow through a bunch of people in the street. You're done. You're on history. The previous statement still applies. If you are so unfortunate to have brown skin and a Muslim surname, you're done. So that was part of the reason I thought, you know what? I should probably put a bit of time thinking about it. Okay. So now the question of privacy. You always think about privacy as something that we get for granted, right? Throughout history, you always had an amount of privacy. Depends on various societies. Societies have some norms. But the way things are progressing, one thing we need to understand is there is an inherent value of privacy. Let me play that backwards. So who in the room would have a number for Facebook right now? What's the value of Facebook? Market value of Facebook. Okay, so how many other users on Facebook?
1 billion or so.
Okay, so how much is the value of information that Facebook alone has?
There is a law actually which quantifies how much a social network values.
Okay, so there you go. So essentially, there's an information asymmetry that happens where somebody else gets your data, and there's this concept of hidden network, which even though it says 1 billion users, what effectively happens is, and that's something I'm going to touch upon, it's called the hidden network. So imagine you have like 3 people in a particular network, in a very close network. They start giving data about things, then you implicitly or indirectly would get information about other people in the network who are not literally on the network, but at the edges of the network with very high resolutions. And what that implies is the following. Going forward, a lot of people who have more information, more data, as the first speaker Norman said, like data is going to be the gold. And the thing that's going to make gold even better, maybe platinum or diamond, is the ability to access people who could create algorithms or algorithms that could create better algorithms. Okay? And maybe the transition to the next level would be, having the infrastructure to run it, right? So once you do that, the information advantage that you have and your adversary has is very, very different. I'll give you an example. Think about the US presidential elections, right? You saw what happened. Whether it's real news or fake news, understand what is the power of that, right? And that is indirectly related to privacy. So what happens is like when you have somebody on a network and you understand their preferences far better than they do. This is very interesting. It has many implications to you. If you have a healthcare insurance in place, this would turn the whole healthcare insurance into a lemon market. Your insurer knows better than you do about your chances of having something. And Norman mentioned about diabetes mellitus, diabetes type 2, right? As a very interesting case, one of the reasons they have HIPAA in the US is this was exactly what was happening previously. Even though HIPAA is there, US healthcare system is an interesting question, which I probably wouldn't comment on. Right, so let me try. So in general, I gave you like a context of what privacy means, and it's about revealing location and content, right? And I will show you a slide which actually shows you what that means. And yeah, okay, let me just do that. Okay, so I'm sure, is there anybody in the room who hasn't recognized SLAM? Oh, okay, all right. Phew, don't worry. It's essentially something simple, right? You have a thing called the radar. It's like a radar with a laser. And what it does is like it reflects laser back and then creates a cloud, a collection of cloud. And what you do is you do localization based on probabilities. So essentially something like this. You are blindfolded, put into a room, and you're asked to find where you are. Say you know to do something like this, right? Echolocation. And then you go, oh yeah, I think I'm near this door. So, and you make a few more moves and then you do a few more times that, and then you figure out exactly what it is. And to do that, you have to create this kind of clouds. And see, what is happening is if you look at the top of the car, there's a lid outside on top. And everything around it is being recognized. Everything around it. That is a key word you need to understand. It doesn't ask you your permission, right? See this. Everybody is considered equal. Whether you're male, female, or your sexual orientation or skin color, it doesn't matter. It tracks every one of you. Right? So this has significant privacy implications. Just to give you some context so that you guys understand exactly what I'm talking about. So imagine today in the UK, if everybody's blood groups, nothing serious, just blood groups were revealed, you know what will happen? Yeah, apparently at least 2% of the population will recognize whoever they consider their parents. You know who? It's not their parent. Guess what happens next? So imagine the implications of this, right? You claim to somebody you were someplace else and this thing recognizes, this guy was there at this point in time with this person next to them. Okay, now explain. Now there are some ways around it, okay? The holy grail of security previously was how do you attach policy to data, okay? So imagine that I sign up to something. You have my data. There's no way on earth that I have any ability to actually make sure you do what you said to me about the data I gave you, right? Say I sign up to Facebook. Facebook has a policy. The policy says they will do this. Who really knows what the fuck they do? Nobody does, right? Actually, they run a whole bunch of experiments. You know the psychological experiments they published recently? That's totally against the privacy policy. And they did that, and then they published it, and somebody else figured out, oh shit, you did that. Really? So the way around it is something called smart contracts, okay? All right, I will try to explain this very simply. Okay, can I have a show of hands? Who has been to London? Okay, who has an Oyster card? Okay, good. So the thing is, it's a simple card. I think I might have one. No, I don't think I have. So essentially what it does is like, it could be any card, right? It is a till, and when you walk in, you touch. You walk out, you touch out. So essentially what this card does to you is it negotiates on behalf of you to TfL, the guys who actually run the tube stations, And then at the end of the negotiation, it gives you the best rate possible. I'll explain that once more. So imagine you travel 4 times, right? And you get charged more than the daily limit. Then the contract would actually, the logic in it would actually negotiate it down to the day's maximum, right? So this is an interesting scenario. So imagine this happening without that form factor, right? Without having that card, right? That's a smart contract. So make sense? Okay. Right. So this is kind of how people have been thinking about what smart contracts can do. I just put it out there so you guys can kind of get an idea of what can happen. But what is most important for me and for everybody here is the fact that you can actually have very interesting constructs for creating organizations and creating what I would describe agreements, right? So distributed autonomous organizations are organizations which can occur by using smart contracts, and that can exist for a period of time to do some things and actually have, have results at the end of it. So the way I would describe it is, imagine you have a bunch of cars. I'm going to give you an example and then I'll walk you through. At times when you sit in a traffic jam, you wonder, what the hell can I do to get out of this traffic? Okay, I'm going to give you a scenario where I have a solution for you. All the cars start bidding for a price at which it will allow the other car to go through. So in a queue, you're sat there and cars start negotiating. The highest bidder gets a chance to get out of the way and they go through. Right? Right now, it doesn't happen. I haven't seen it happen anywhere so far. If you could come up with an app to do this, I'm pretty sure there's lots of money to be made. Right? I'm not kidding. Go to Thailand or someplace like that. You will really know what I really mean. Okay? Real value of time for a lot of people could be found out by using this experiment. Now, if you imagine in an autonomous car world, if the cars could actually do this, right? They can easily do this already. Because all they need to do is the same thing that I was describing to you, right? So you negotiate with the next party. What's the highest that you actually want to give to allow me pass through? You do that, get an agreement. Once you have a consensus, off you go, right? It has other implications as well. You can actually have like privacy implications and other things. We will touch upon that later. But I'm just giving you an idea about why smart contracts are important and what is possible and what can change the world around us. Right. Okay, this is the geeky bit. Ignore it. Okay, so yeah, I have to admit, I generally have this slide to just describe what blockchain means to most people. So to me, blockchain is a data structure. And the way I describe it is as follows, right? If I have like a £5 note or whatever note you have, if I give it to somebody, I no longer have it. But imagine I have an electronic currency of some kind. I can give it n number of times. The cost of copying is infinitesimally small that I can do it a million times and still it's less than the cost of actual whatever. So you want to prevent this from happening. This is called offline double spend, right? And the data structure that prevents this is called blockchain. Okay, so the bit that I'm going to say now is kind of going to be interesting and it's going to be kind of controversial, possibly, and kind of giving you an intuition of where things are going. So imagine you had the ability to travel in time, okay? You had a magical ability to travel in time. I've just been to your archaeological museum. I was just thinking about it while I was there. So first time when real commerce started, it was like I would turn up, I'll look at Casey and go, you know what? Have some donkeys. Do you want to give you monkeys for my donkeys? It's a synchronous protocol. I give the monkey, he gives the donkey, off we go, done, right? And some smart guy in a few hundred years from there figured out, you know what? Somebody will be willing to give a monkey for 100 eggs. And eggs doesn't perish instantaneously. Something that could temporarily store value so you can do asynchronous transactions. Break a synchronous transaction into an asynchronous transaction, right? That was a huge innovation. And it created a lot of value. And the value was actually created for who? The intermediaries. So anybody who's an intermediary who could do a store and forward actually makes the most money. Look at the world economy now. What do you see? Everybody who's an intermediary makes the most money. And what do you think the future would be? There you go. Everybody knows the answer is. And that is going to be really, really facilitated by smart contracts. Okay, so now about privacy. Somebody already asked me about privacy. I'm going to give you like an indication of what you can actually do to get some privacy. So, like 3 major ones. Somehow my slide got reformatted. Okay, so one is the permission blockchain. Second is the thing called zero knowledge. And third one is called homomorphic encryption. I'll describe all 3 in very simplistic terms. Okay, the easiest one is zero knowledge proofs. Okay, it depends. Okay, let me start with this one. The classic example I give is, imagine you go into a room, just one door, and I say to you, you stand at the door, and once I walk in, if I come out on the other side, I can prove to you that I have the ability to escape from this room without using the door. Same applies to a bottle of water. If I say to you, okay, I have the magical ability to drink the water in this bottle without actually opening it, and I just do it, then it's zero knowledge proof. You and I know that I can drink it, but you don't know how I drink it. Right? Simple as that. Before and after the protocol, whatever you know is whatever you know, nothing else. Right, okay. And there's this concept of prover and verifier. The person who makes a claim is the prover, and the verifier is the person who just looks at it and goes, yes, no. Right, and this is the most interesting bit I love about zero knowledge protocols, okay? And the first 2 things, if it were true in real life, the life would have been a lot easier. Maybe not, I don't know. Humans in general have the problem of lying, and this doesn't really work, okay? Completeness. If prover is telling the truth, then they will eventually convince the verifier, okay? As long as you tell the truth. Lots of time we wish that were true. And the other way around is soundness. Prover can only convince the verifier if you are actually telling the truth. And between the two, the completeness and the soundness, I wish the real world were like this, but I'm sure there will be lots of problems. Okay. Right. Now, the reason I had this slide is there's an interesting change in paradigm. Until now, as I was describing, the way to prove something was interactive. So I have a row of these bottles stacked in front of me, say 1 to 2, 3, 4, 5, up to n, and I go, the first bottle I'll try do this. Can I drink? I'll prove to you I can drink. The second bottle I try, I might not be able to, so I can't. Third, that essentially you get 1 bit, 1 yes or no answer for every experiment you run. And you have to have arbitrary number of interactions, as many interactions as bottles have, right? But imagine you have a magical way you could actually do it one go, and you can get an answer. That's called succinct, non-interactive argument of knowledge, right? So you have 1 go. Essentially, you have a string, and you pick something at random, and then just do the test. And then you know for a fact that, whatever you claim is true. So you don't actually do an interactive protocol. That's the simplest way to describe it. And this is very, very interesting, because until now, one of the key reasons why we don't have so much use of zero knowledge proofs is because it was overhead and the time it takes for things to happen. Right, now, okay. This is an interesting thing. There was already this conversation where Norman, I think, was mentioning about search engines and stuff like that. So, when you go to Google and search for a flight, you get an email from somebody saying you need to go to, say, Sofia. And then you go and do a search on Google. Instantaneously, Google knows that you want to go to Sofia, right? That's this ad for you, right? Now, imagine this. You had this ability to do this, right? You send something to Google. Google has no clue what you're asking, but it still does the search for you. Actually, that is now possible. So there's this guy called Craig Gentry. He works for IBM. His PhD thesis was on homomorphic encryption. Now you ask me, what is the catch? Yeah, the catch is quite simple. It takes a very long time. So it's like a couple of Ks worth of storage and a lot of compute for 1 bit. Sorry. Okay, it's very effective though for some things. Let me explain what I mean. Right, I don't have anything here. Okay. Does anybody have coffee in the room? All right. No. Coffee. Yes, that's a good example. Hold it out for me. I just want everybody to see coffee, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, right. Okay, right.
Do you want this one?
No, I will just keep it here and give it back to you.
Okay.
So the thing about coffee is the following, right? It's a homomorphic addition, right? Irrespective of the fact, the order in which you add milk, if you have milk, water or sugar, the end result will be the same. Am I making sense to you? No?
He was making coffee.
It doesn't work like that.
Okay, you can make coffee differently. In a theoretical world of academic crypto, we do it that way. So that is the magic. So you can actually do a homomorphic function. So in this case, it's a homomorphic addition. You can do things and still, without, you don't actually need to know everything, but you can still get the result. That's the simplest thing I would normally say. You can have your coffee back now. Hello. Yeah, right, there you
I
go.
was already on my phone chatting.
That's fine, that's okay. Right, so now the other bit that's very interesting and very important is like we were starting the conversation with what happens if, right? What happens if your car gets on the pavement, right? Now the what happens if argument also has a conditional statement. What if the case for which the car got on the pavement was saving somebody's lives? The classic way of representing that is called the trolley problem. It's like you have a kid on the trolley versus a bunch of humans. Which one would you choose, right? There are lots of different solutions being proposed, but that's an interesting thing. No real, how could I say, answer is there that you can go works for all conditions, right? So it is important. What is really important in this condition is the fact that you can prove to a third party that whatever decision you ended up with, you actually went through the right and proper ethics or mechanisms by which you can derive the answer. Whether you did it or a machine did it, irrespective of whether it's a machine or a human, if you could prove that, you might stand a chance in a court of law. And that's the interesting perspective, I think, that's interesting for autonomous vehicles and for humans. So these are like slightly more sophisticated versions of it. Don't worry. It wasn't meant to be Fat Man in that sense, but somehow the people who actually named the problem named it that way. Okay, this was added the last minute because I was told that the 2 talks previous to this was very high level and I should try and make it a bit more real. So this is the bit I do on my spare time. So I have a project on the side where I look at things, which is like try get ethics from the human space to go into machine space. So effectively, if you have a problem like the trolley problem, you can actually try understand how humans normally do this. So imagine that you take a sample of 100 humans, right? You'll get an idea because everything is about norms, right? Okay, let me explain this bit to you slightly better. So if you are in a court of law and if you can prove that your mental faculty is intact, okay, you know what that means, right? Right? Then they can give you punishment. But this is a very interesting bit. It is an interesting paradox. So it's an interesting paradox in the sense like the sense of sanity, even described by GSM-V4, is pretty much dependent on the norm. So if you go to a place where everybody's crazy, you be normal. But if you go to a place where everybody's normal, you be crazy. So you understand where I'm going, right? So if you can actually get the average of a human, and a set of all humans, then you can get a very good bound on what decision factors are and how you could actually make a machine make a simulation of what a human can do. So this was the whole idea behind this OpenEarth project. And we tried doing this. It's like we have a bunch of these things and you can actually go look it up, and I have this one case to show you how it will look like. So this is just to give you an idea about all the challenges you have in terms of key ethical questions. You need to actually make decisions by an autonomous vehicle. It could be around privacy, it could be around lives, it could be around anything, right? So there's a whole string of things that are open there. I was just walking you through like a slices of things because I was told there's just 20 minutes to talk and I just stripped everything out. So I was trying to give you like flavor of one problem each so you guys could know, how it feels like, the challenges around autonomous vehicles. So, okay, that's fine. So this is a classic case, right? So there is a kid running across, there's all these problems. How do you choose, what to do? So if you do something like this is pretty straightforward. I don't have a driving license, okay? So don't look at me, right? So I'm assuming you guys have come across this before and you know how to solve this problem. But you could actually capture this and get it into a reasonable state. And you can actually have some possible, takeaways and duties, which kind of implies the rules that you need to comply by, so you can prove to a third party that you actually went through the whole process and you made a decision based on best possible knowledge and best possible intent. Okay? So yeah, it's fine. So that's pretty much what I had thought about. Yep. And if you guys get very interested in ethics of AI in that sense and what's AI safety all about, just what the future literally sticks at, in the edge of this touches on AI safety, you should probably read Superintelligence. And if you just want to understand what machine ethics is, you should probably look in the book in the middle. It's a very light read. You can even try reading it to the, what do you call, the book that you read before you go to sleep? What's it called? Bedtime read. Sorry, yes. And the last one is definitely not bedtime read. It is a book that will send you to sleep if you read it. But the good part is you can get that online for free. So Oded is such a nice gentleman. He actually wrote it and made it available to everybody. I have a print copy because I thought, I owe it to him to buy one copy. But this one, the volume, the basic tools one is pretty good. Very, very good. You would definitely read it if you are interested. So that's all, folks.
Thank you. What a wonderful mind you have, and you've seen so many of these problems. You've actually tackled them. How are you guys feeling? Do you want to do a little interactive session? I know we're running quite late. Interact? Just quick show of hands, interact. All right, cool. All right, let's do a little one. We've got about half here. Could we get the chairs up, please, if the team's around? And again, I'm gonna kick off just to get us started really quick. I have an ethical problem with our course for African entrepreneurs. We have enough insight into how they're progressing that we will now face pressure or opportunity to let's grab a seat. Oh yeah, share the mic. To start to predict whether or not they're going to be successful in order to start to introduce business models, for example, for investors. I'm worried about the scenarios where we get it wrong, because when a lot of the entrepreneurs we work with, for example, work in clean water technology or sanitation or something that really the lives depend on, and if we get this wrong, there's resources that they don't get. So can you help me think this through? What do we need to consider?
So I should put my hand up and say something which I didn't say so far. I'm an effective altruist. I sit on the board for EA Ventures. So effective altruists are a bunch of people who look at trying to do good. Okay, this is keyword, trying to do good. And we look at resources and try our best to optimize it. So problems like that is quite normal. And I will explain, I'll give you a bit more context so you guys get it. So imagine you're in a developed country, right? Imagine UK. So the value of 1 year of good health of an average human in the UK is £30,000. Do you know what is the cost of saving a life in sub-Saharan Africa? $1. You can get a mosquito net, anti-malarial mosquito net, you will save a life. This is a very contextual problem, right? So when you have a trade-off of resources where your value is kind of arbitrary, you will have to understand on a short term and a long term what it really means, both temporally and geographically. Okay, so sometimes what it really makes sense is like it could be that one particular question that gets a yes in one context might not get. So for example, if you have a situation when you're doing clean water, right? There are lots of instances where the solution is not appropriate because what you're looking at, So there's always a trade-off. I mean, you can think of it globally or you can think of it locally. So the trade-off is like there's human effort lost, time lost, and there's resources lost. So what's the best fit solution for the product of all three? And if you can find that nice fit, that's probably the best way to answer that.
You know, I was wondering for a combination between blockchain and artificial intelligence, and I got really interested. How did you make the application and to use the smart contracts? I just didn't get the idea. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Okay, it's quite simple. I'll try explain. So I'll give you a bit more intuition, and then I will hide the maths. And if you get really interested, I'll point you to a bunch of papers and you can read it. So imagine you had this ability, right? Oh, okay, it's quite trivial. So imagine all you guys' eyes are bound, and there's just a corridor, and somebody's walking past with a cardboard box across the corridor, right? Just pushing it across the corridor. You can only listen. You can only listen, right? But I'm pretty sure that you could all recognize whether the cardboard box is full or empty, right? So pretty much that could be applied to algorithms. So you can have black boxes where you get some information about something being done, okay, without revealing what it is, and you will have an assurance as to what is being done without revealing what is being done. That's the real beauty about Zenona's proofs. So imagine I say to you, okay, let me give you a bit more intuition. The previous question, right? The previous question where he was looking at technology and how the validation is going to happen. Imagine I had an algorithm that's going to do the evaluation, right? And I have this mechanism, which is some sort of proof, which runs as a smart contract, which makes sure that the algorithm actually uses all the data I provided, okay, and agrees to actually give the same weightage that was agreed without revealing the weightage. All it tells you is used it, but it doesn't tell you the weightage. So I'll give you one more example. If you did the same to Google, right, you should be able to understand whether it is being fair, because you now know whether all the criteria that's been applied for one search is applied to the next search too. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Does it answer your question?
Yep.
Oh, okay. You want it?
Yeah.
But it doesn't answer mine. Go first.
We have a quick one. I'm wondering, are you so happy because of the rising price of the Ethereum for the last couple of weeks?
I don't have any Ethereum. No.
I was pretty sure you have one.
No, I shall admit I ran the first Bitcoin mining workshop in 2011 in Hackerspace in London. I sit on the board for Ripple Labs. I don't own a single share of Ripple Labs. I am part of the Swarm team. I help them with research. I don't own a single Ethereum. I value my intellectual integrity more than money. And I'm poor.
That's a good segue. You were asked to talk about integrity, about ethics. I was asked to talk about commerce and implementation. What happens when we sell access to this chair? Do we all have to pay the same price? Is it access for everyone? Do I have to pay on my own economic value, on my consumption of the goods? How can I combine the ideologies of ethics to commerce? And how can we build a bridge between ideas on fairness to survivability from a business? How do we sell the chair?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a very interesting answer to that, right? So mostly when people ask me this kind of questions, I say to them, mostly markets with no asymmetries, no information asymmetries, generally give you a very good idea, right? So let's take the example of the cars in the queue wanting to go ahead, right? What he said is absolutely true. And everybody in the car, different cars have different value for the time to get to wherever they want to. So you know what? End of the day, if that real auction happens and that value is being redistributed across everybody in the queue, that's a win-win for everybody. The business wins, The people who actually want to get to where they want to wins, and there's fairness being applied there.
Okay, that's good, but I have a really good interaction point, a microcomputer that can understand all the contextual information. Is that fair for it to judge or a system to judge who I am? How does it determine what value that I should place on this?
I think that is like, okay, that's a very wrong question to ask in that sense.
Okay.
Let me explain that to you, right? So imagine you go for a job interview, and then you come back and say, what do you think about whether you would date me or not? That would be the kind of question you're asking, right? Sorry, I mean, it's so orthogonal. You don't go into your doctor's office thinking about whether you will get a job somewhere else. So everything has a context. And in many ways, humans survive because those isolations occur, right? I'm pretty sure everybody right now can think of 10 scenarios of things that you don't want to tell your parents, right? I can think of many more than
think
that.
a few more, yes.
Yeah, yes. So, so this context is the king. So information is important for transactions and making decisions, but when and how is revealed. I'll give you another example just to give you really what I really mean by this. Imagine you, God forbid, right? There's such a thing. Ignore that bit. So you are in an accident and emergency. And at that point in time, you give a shit about privacy. What really you care about is saving the patient, okay? And what happens then is like everything that you should have as medical history should be available to the physician in the accident and emergency. That's a unique situation, right? These are situations where anything that you can actually use to help could be used. But in most other contexts, the fact that you sleep with somebody else could actually cause so much hassle, reputational damage, this, that, other, your life might not be worth doing it. There are a lot of people who commit suicide for that, right? That piece of information is revealed at that point in time because at that point in time, you're almost dead if that, whatever that information that you need to get access to. So it's very contextual. Everything as information has a value and it has context and consent.
How do we balance commerce from ethics? Salim just showed up. There's another person. Oh, look who it is. Now there's two more people. How do we take that a balance from me trying to figure out how much value is in that seat? Because there's only one left. And look, you took the last one. Yeah, someone needs to take it. Yeah, exactly. So is it ethical for us to build systems that are intelligent enough to see so much detail in the world around us versus our inherent privacy? How do we as commercially driven individuals find a balance?
I mean, this is a societal problem. You and I can't actually rule sets. No, let me explain what this means. It's a very societal problem. Society has to set norms to what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, right? Throughout history, a lot of things were acceptable and not acceptable. I'm not going to go through the list of them, right? So, this could be one of those things. They go, privacy is not acceptable. Society says so, laws passed, done. So, I don't know.
Okay. I want to take the conversation from another point of view. So I'm not very savvy in AI, but from like cognitive point of view, I know that an AI algorithm to work, you have to feed it a bunch of data, right? And right now, yes, there's a lot of companies gathering a lot of data. So I was just wondering, I kind of see that as a mechanism. Maybe all this data now predispositions the opportunity for AI, for many AI algorithms to, start working. But I was just wondering on what's your opinion from ethical point of view, how good or bad it is to empower those AI algorithms taking all this data that was gathered, maybe with consent, maybe without it. I'm just a little bit confused with that.
I shall try my level best. I'm not a politician. I don't know how to say things politically correct.
No, just personal opinion.
All right. So the way I describe it is biases caused by data is huge. So the best example I give is what happened to the algorithm that Microsoft had, right? Microsoft had an algorithm. Pretty shortly, it turned out to be very racist. So there is very little you could do about it. Yes, there are things you could do. You can actually make algorithms behave in a particular manner. That's what I was talking about, smart contracts and things like that. But the challenge is where we are with doing all those things. The societal value is not big enough. Let me explain what that means. So imagine you're Facebook. Even if you break the law in the US, I don't think anything big is going to happen. In Europe, especially when GDPR comes in, there will be implications. You can lose up to 5% of your overall turnover as whatever that is. And now let me play this back to you in a different way. Imagine I have a smart contract that can actually enforce everything and charges you the 5% every time you make you does that, right? So there's no human in the loop. It does the enforcement. See the difference.
Can I bring another scenario into this? So I've taken you up on your advice. I have gone to Thailand and I've created this marketplace for space on roads. It's successful. I'm now a monopoly, or close to it, and you are my ethics advisor. And we are starting to see scenarios where, call them Rockefeller scenarios, where somebody recognizes that somebody on that road shouldn't get to a meeting because if they get to that meeting, that will hurt my business, and I can now be anti-competitive to stop them. So I'm going to hire as many Ubers as I can to fill that road and pay whatever it takes to make sure that only my cars are going through that road. How do we handle that? What are the things that we should do there?
Yeah, so what you're kind of asking me is if I were your security advisor, do I get shares for my ethical advisor?
Yes. Yes, you get most of the company if you can figure this out.
So quite simply put, this is a protocol problem. It's a security problem. Whenever a security is being constructed, it assumes a whole bunch of things. The assumption in the previous thing was the collusion and information sharing wouldn't actually happen in the ways in which somebody could make money out of it, right? So right now, the same scenario happens in trading, right? How do you actually solve the problem in trading? You put rules and you have somebody who will knock the doors and, put people in jail. Maybe that's one way to look at it. There are other ways to do it.
Okay, but in this case, it's not illegal.
Who knows? You can pass a law tomorrow saying this is illegal. Say, if you actually have like a person in an ambulance and you play the game against it, somehow inhibit by a very small margin, there's a loss of life. And when you have loss of life, a lot of politicians would get interested. You can easily have a law, and that could be interesting.
But so are you basically saying that this is a policy issue, and as a company, we shouldn't intervene here?
No, what I'm saying is all problems are not nails, and you can't use a hammer to nail it down, right? There are different tools for different problems.
Let's say that you know that I want to be ethical in this situation, and as a shareholder, the company, founder, whatever it is, I'm not happy with this.
You could actually easily detect collusions. Collusions could be easily detected. So my previous job in one of the retail banks, we built a platform to do a lot of anomaly detection. You can actually recognize a lot of things. You do it once and you do it twice, you could easily track the person down, right? And you can kick the person out and you can actually reverse price the guy out, right? Easily. There are lots of algorithmic ways of battling this thing. The lowest hanging fruit is simple. Try trusted proven thing. What is it? It's a legal system and police. That's it's been tested for so many years and it's already there. The cost of running it, you don't have to do anything delta, right? But you can look at, that's what I said, like there are different ways of solving problems and different set of solutions.
Are there, if I wanted to start researching this,
Yeah.
not just collusion, but other types of scenarios like this that aren't necessarily collusion,
Yeah.
are there, what resources should I look at?
Oh, that's a good question. You can look at attacks on reputation, and you can look at attacks on auction systems. Yeah, sorry.
One last one.
So you talked before about the importance of, or sort of maybe the threat of informational asymmetry, that when you're trying to come up with kind of optimal solutions with lots of nodes, lots of actors and everything, informational asymmetry is what causes a lot of these problems. And I just want to get maybe your broad thoughts, and particularly if I'm understanding smart contracts properly, how they fit into this, but how do we combat informational asymmetry in a world in which the amount of data and information being created is increasing exponentially, and we all know that we don't stand a chance at being aware enough to maybe make these ethical decisions?
So at this point in time, I'll be very philosophical. I wrote a paper like 6 years ago. It was titled The New Secret. I kind of described what this will happen and how it will happen. And then I followed that up with another chapter in one of Bloomsbury's books. But my thinking is like the whole philosophical and ethical community in the world have to think about this very differently. So far, we've had an easy ride. The impact of Facebook has not been that detrimental. It has been detrimental to a lot of people. A lot of people have been caught cheating. Don't get me wrong, right? A lot of other people have paid price for other things. There are good things and bad things. And people haven't changed their paradigm of thinking about value of information and what really information asymmetry really means. We're just trying to understand this. We're just understanding the power of algorithms. And a lot of politicians just rudely woken up to what really happened in the US. And they really started to understand this. Believe me, and you can watch for this, in the next few years, we will have serious debate on this topic. And I think the society needs to come to an agreement on lots of things. And, sometimes, society might not be able to, and then we need to look at alternate ways of finding solutions. But as far as I could see, the best thing we have is the thing that's worked for us all the time, the governance systems, democracy. I don't know how democracy works, but, well, yeah. I mean, it's tricky. I'll tell you why I say that. It's like, if you believe that intellect is useful for any decision-making process, it's a very simple term, right? You are most likely to find that the people to your left on a bell curve will be the people who have most influence on the decision that you need to make. That's the problem of democracy.
Thank you. And we've really gone over time, so I think we should continue this conversation over drinks in the bar upstairs. And let's give a very big round of applause to the rest of us who are here, to Anish, and thank you so much for all the insight you gave us. It was really good. Yeah. Good job. Thanks. I'll really brief in the wrap-up. We are handing out feedback forms. We really do take action on this feedback, and I really, really appreciate it if you actually write some things and think about how we can make this more useful. You've already paid a fairly premium price for a ticket for a 3-hour event, especially in Sofia. And we'd really appreciate the trust that you're kind of giving us to try to get the work and make this community work and help work for Sofia, work for all of us, and so we can try to help each other out and do some really cool things. I really want to thank all the people that helped out tonight and all of you for the attention, and my partners who were on stage and contributed their thoughts as well. And also I want to thank Yalta for giving us this really, really cool venue, which I think is the first time the tech event has been run in this iconic place. There's a really interesting party happening here quite often. I think the next takeover is on the 19th of May, right? Is that right, Lubo? Okay, cool. So consider yourselves invited to go to what I think is the best electronic music party in town. And yeah, grab feedback forms, grab the remainder of the beers, and let's go upstairs on the bar, and we have the place till 11 p.m. for drinks. Thank you very much all. Yeah, before that, the next event is going to be on somewhere between the 6th or 8th of June during Digitalk. You received an email. Again, the tickets are going to be like plane tickets. The sooner you get them, the cheaper they are. We kind of took some feedback and made the increase of the price less aggressive. You look at your emails, and don't forget about the conference tomorrow. Yeah. So find me if you want to participate tomorrow. Thank you so much.